Welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here are the stories that we're tracking at this hour. Coming up within the hour is the U.S. President Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia alongside Elon Musk for his first major diplomatic trip of his second term. Scores of South Africans take up Donald Trump's offer of citizenship in the U.S. over so-called racial discrimination back home. Plus, French President Emmanuel Macron announces his upcoming trip to the UK in July as guest of the King and Queen. Let's begin. The US and Saudi Arabia have signed a $142 billion arms deal on the first day of President Donald Trump's visit to the kingdom. Under the deal, the US will provide state-of-the-art war-fighting equipment to Saudi Arabia, who will in turn invest $20 billion in artificial intelligence in the U.S. as part of the deal. Both leaders have also been engrossed in an investment forum where the U.S. president is expected to give a leadership address. There's also commitment from U.S. technology firms to invest $80 billion in cutting-edge transformative technologies in both countries. U.S. exports of gas turbines and energy solutions worth $14.2 billion, as well as Boeing 737-8 passenger aircraft worth $4.8 billion. There's also cooperation agreements between the two countries on energy and mining. Now, amongst the U.S. president's entourage to Saudi Arabia is Trump's director of government efficiency, Elon Musk. He and other VIP guests attended lunch today in Riyadh's royal court. The executives from tech firms, banks, consumer groups, and other industries, including representatives of 4 of the 10 biggest U.S. companies by market value, were there to pitch for business and from deep-pocketed Saudi investors, businesses and government departments. Their companies are also dealing with tariffs imposed by President Trump on U.S. trading partners. So the trip is also an opportunity to lobby top Trump officials such as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on trade policy. Saudi Arabia has emerged as one of the world's largest investors in artificial intelligence, an effort to diversify the oil-rich nation's economy and give it influence over one of the hottest sectors in the business world. Notable AI players at the launch include Sam Altman, the chief executive of ChatGPT parent OpenAI, Jensen Huang, the leader of the advanced chipmaker NVIDIA, Ruth Porat, the chief investment officer of Alphabet, Google's parent company, and Andy Jassy, the chief of Amazon, which is a major provider of cloud computing services. Let's switch to other matters now. Concerning the United States, the government on Monday welcomed 49 South African individuals who will be granted refugee status under President Donald Trump's new refugee plan, signaling further tensions between the two nations. The group arrived in Washington, D.C. via a charter plane and will be given priority refugee status, with Trump stating he is admitting them due to the genocide that's taking place. The development comes amid further diplomatic tensions between Washington and Pretoria, which have been locked in several disputes since Trump took office in January. Trump argued that members of the Afrikaner minority in South Africa were victims of racial discrimination and that white farmers were being killed, allegations the country's government denies. While U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau was part of the U.S. delegation that welcomed the group on their arrival.
The Deputy Secretary and I just spoke to some of the folks who arrived on this flight, and they tell quite harrowing stories of the violence that they faced in South Africa that was not redressed by the authorities, by the unjust application of the law. The United States, as we were proud to say, has stands for equal justice under law and the fair and impartial application of the law. And again, this is a group that has not experienced that and has, to the contrary, experienced violence and really fear for their lives in South Africa. They were really subject to very serious, egregious, and targeted threats. And we wish them well in their journey to the United States.
And this has been a very important day. It was great to greet these folks that came in, to hear their stories, to hear what they've been through. This is a real situation. These people have went through a lot of stuff, and we're just grateful to have them in the U.S.
Well, obtaining refugee status in the U.S. is usually a years-long process. However, the U.S. government has fast-tracked applications from white South Africans under the justification that they were targets of prosecution and racial discrimination in their homeland. The South African government has called U.S. claims that Afrikaners face persecution completely false, noting that they have remained among the richest and most economically privileged groups even after the end of the apartheid system that upheld white minority control of the political, economic and military resources of the country and denied basic rights to the black South African majority. Our next report shows the inside of South Africa's exclusive Afrikaner-only settlement as President Trump offers asylum.
3 decades ago, a group of white Afrikaners was opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended, that they carved out separatist enclaves. The only town in South Africa where all residents, including menial workers, are white. The most prominent towns associated with Afrikaners are Orania, Klefontein, both established as Afrikaner-only settlements after the end of apartheid. Residents of the Afrikaner-only enclave of Klefontein now defend their settlement's cultural exclusivity amid renewed criticism and international attention following a 2025 executive order by U.S. President Donald Trump offering asylum to white Afrikaners. Spokesperson Danny De Beer said the settlement was created to protect Afrikaner heritage and identity after the end of apartheid.
Klefontein started in 1992. We're about 900 hectares big. We have 9 pieces of property that all belong to the company. And you as a resident, you become a member of the company, and then you have right on that piece of ground. Today we're around about 1,500 people. So it's almost like we are being singled out and we are being punished for being Afrikaners and for protecting our heritage and our culture.
Critics say Klefontain's policies mirror segregationist practices from the apartheid era, which ended in 1994. Under apartheid, the white minority government implemented laws that excluded the black majority from land ownership, political participation, and economic opportunities. The community has faced legal and political pressure over the years, but maintains that its model is legal under South African law.
We do work together.
Board chairperson Rian Gillis said the community evaluates all potential residents based on their alignment with Afrikaner cultural principles.
So if a black family were to want to live here, we would look at that family as a whole. Remember, they need to comply to the basic principles of the Afrikaner culture. We're not so much worried about the black family as we are about Afrikaner culture. And if they do not comply with that, there is no chance that they will be invited to come and live here.
President Trump's executive order in February 2025 cited alleged violence against white farmers and South Africa's land expropriation policies as grounds for offering Afrikaners refuge status in the United States. However, South African authorities have repeatedly disputed allegations of persecution and discrimination against the white minority group. South Africa's constitution protects cultural rights, but legal experts have argued that exclusive communities like Klefontein test the boundaries of non-discrimination provisions.
Coming up after the break on The World Today. Eden Alexander, the Israeli-American hostage released by Hamas, is reunited with his family in Israel. Stay with us. Welcome back. We'd like to remind you of our lead story today, which is the U.S. President Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia, where he signed a $142 billion arms deal, the first day of his visit, coming on his second tenure as president. Now, under this deal, the U.S. will provide state-of-the-art warfighting equipment to Saudi Arabia, who will in turn invest $20 billion in artificial intelligence in the U.S. Both leaders have also been engrossed in an investment forum where the U.S. president is expected to give a leadership address. There's also commitment from U.S. technology firms to invest $80 billion in cutting-edge transformative technologies in both countries. U.S. exports of gas turbines and energy solutions worth $14.2 billion are also on the table, as well as Boeing 737-8 passenger aircraft worth $4.8 billion, as well as cooperation agreements between the two countries' energy and mining sectors. Those you'd like to enjoy footage from Saudi Arabia as President Donald Trump walked with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has been monitoring closely developments in Saudi Arabia. She joins us now. Maria, this visit is a huge deal, isn't it, for President Trump? Not just for him as president, but also as a businessman.
Yes, this is a very big trip for the president. We know the type of natural resources that Saudi Arabia possesses. We know all the business deals that he has actually done previously with that region. And so this is a huge time and moment. We know what just happened over the weekend with his discussions with China. We know that he has much expectation about expanding the U.S.'s involvement in trade. And I think this is just another estimate and another testament to really his commitment to being able to address trade across the U.S. and specifically finding ways to increase its trade partnerships. We also know that this is a time where there's very sensitive relationships between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so he is obviously taking solace with Saudi Arabia in this. And this could be not only just a business piece, but also diplomatic pieces as well. And so the question, though, is how will this impact the U.S. and Iran moving forward?
And President Trump was expected to give a leadership address that was supposed to happen at least a few minutes just before airtime. What has he said about the deals signed, and how will these help the United States?
Well, as you mentioned, this is a business piece, right? So his speech is really going to focus on discussing what he's believed to be unthinkable suffering in several countries in the region. He's going to also discuss the U.S. and Saudi Arabia has imposed, obviously, some unprecedented sanctions on Iran, and which has caused some resource shortages, which he believes have been funding terror. He's going to be addressing, kind of the ideas around nuclear weapons. And so in the U.S. is not allowing Iran to produce these types of nuclear weapons. So this is going to be a speech really addressing the region as a whole and the U.S.'s commitment to Saudi Arabia and their commitment to increasing the support in that region.
Talking about the arms deal, Maria, how important is it for for the U.S. and for Saudi Arabia? It kind of does presuppose that the Saudi government does recognize America's supremacy in military defense.
Yes, as you mentioned, the nuclear deal is key and critical. We know that there has been arms discussions with the U.S. and Iran, and obviously with Saudi Arabia. The president has stated that he's not just looking to reject the nuclear deal; he's also looking for new paths forward for a far better and more helpful future. He says we'll have no choice but to inflict maximum pressure to ensure this, and so he's looking to really reject some of the nuclear deals, but most importantly, to find new paths forward.
Elon Musk, in many of the videos that we have there, he was amongst the president's entourage, as well as some other business people hoping to get a deal as well in Saudi Arabia. Was he able to clinch any?
Well, I think that they're still in the midst. I think we'll find out whether or not he's been able to clinch any. We know, as you stated, this is far more than just the actual political side of this. It's business deals as well. And as you noted, with Musk being there and his heavy interest in expanding his business enterprises. So I think we'll get further details as to if he was able to move anything forward. At this time, we've not heard what he has specifically addressed for his own enterprises.
We'll probably get to hear about that in a few minutes. But Maria, I also wanted you to address, the $400 million gift that President Donald Trump received recently from Qatar. Isn't it against the law, I mean, U.S. law that is, for public officials to receive such expensive gifts, especially from foreign governments?
Yes, this is receiving a lot of backlash from in the United States regarding this gift of, as you mentioned, a $400 million jet, which is supposedly going to replace Air Force One, according to what they're stating what this gift will be used for. And so this jet is, as you mentioned, this is not in alignment with traditional U.S. customs and even potentially having some legal ramifications in regard to accepting this gift. So the question is, what will kind of come next? Will we actually see this jet replace Air Force One, and how the president will be able to overcome this?
Right. And I'm just, thinking if Air Force One is going to be replaced, it wouldn't be with a jet from a foreign country, especially a country that supports Iran, also supports Hamas. I mean, how trusting should the U.S. government be of Qatar at this time? And with such an expensive gift, there must be something they want in return.
Well, I think you're addressing exactly where many congressional members are. Obviously, many Americans are, is really around the political ramifications of this gift. We know that there's much more than just the gifting of a $400 million jet. And I think that's where the pressures are going to be for the White House to be able to respond to those. We could potentially even see congressional hearings regarding this gift. You will definitely see further investigation by the Congress as to kind of the origins and what this really means. And as you've stated, some of those would have been considered terror groups in the U.S. that they support Qatar are going to be obviously at the top of mind for Americans and obviously for the congressional and the courts, potentially if the courts get involved in this as well.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. Can Congress prevent him from accepting this gift, though? I mean, he's already accepted it. At the press briefing, he said he would be foolish. He could be foolish, is what he said. He could be foolish to say, oh, no, he's not supposed to accept a gift from a foreign government. But then he could also be wise and go ahead and accept it. And then, of course, it was the end of Trump's tenure as president. He's expected to keep the jet for himself.
Yes, and I think as we've seen before, depending on where his advisors stand on this, if congressional members and those in the Republican Party are able to advise him differently, I don't think he has any problem with turning course, as we've seen him in other instances turn course as well. But as you stated, what we see right now is that he will not be, and he'll be accepting the gift. Congress can enact some laws, but the question is whether or not it'll be able to happen in time before he actually receives the jet and begins to use the jet for as the replacement of Air Force One. So this is unprecedented territory for the United States. Typically, presidents don't accept these types of gifts from foreign countries. And so I think that, especially the size of a gift, I think this is something that Congress and the courts will have to figure out a way as to how to address.
Let's head back to Saudi Arabia. Where is he going from there? I understand this is the first leg of his tour, his first tour as president, his second time round.
Yes, this is president is also scheduled to travel to Qatar and the UAE, and so this week, so he's going to be making a Middle East tour, obviously, and being able to visit these countries. We know that his main reason for moving forward with an agreement with Ukraine was around resources, and so the president is looking for countries that are heavily and have an abundance of natural resources to be able to build relationships with and to be able to leverage that for the U.S. As we know, he is really working hard to bring a lot of manufacturing and a lot of business back into the United States. And so in order to do that, he is going to need support from other countries that have natural resources that will be able to support some of the efforts that the U.S., because we are very drastically under-resourced as it relates to natural resources.
Maria, thanks again for keeping us updated on the president's move. We'll be watching Trump closely from here in Africa. Thanks again. Well, leading our bulletin this afternoon was also the U.S. Government accepting 49 white South African individuals whose citizenship had been fast-tracked by the U.S. government under a special refugee status under President Donald Trump's new refugee plan. The group arrived in Washington via a private charter plane on Monday. They'll be given priority refugee status, with Trump stating he's admitting them due to the genocide that's taking place in South Africa. This development comes amid further diplomatic tensions between Washington and Pretoria, which has been locked in several disputes since Trump took office in January. Trump argues that the members of the Afrikaner minority in South Africa are victims of racial discrimination and that white farmers are being killed, allegations that the country denies. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Amosa, is with us to perhaps debunk some of these allegations against the South African government. So I'm going to ask you straight away, are these Afrikaners being persecuted in South Africa?
Well, a very good evening to you, colleague, and our viewers around the world. Yeah, it's difficult to tell because the question of whether Afrikaners are being persecuted in South Africa is very complex, Amarachi, and deeply contested in the country. Often depending, of course, on one's political, historical, and also, social lens, for a lack of a better term. Now, the facts to consider here, Amarachi, is that crime and farm attacks in the country. Now, Afrikaners advocacy group like the likes of AfriForum have raised an alarm over violence or farm attacks, some of which, of course, involved white farmers. While these attacks, Amarachi, are real and often brutal, they are not, unique to white farmers. Black farmers as well, farm workers and in rural communities are also affected by high crime rates. Everybody is facing this challenge. It's a challenge of crime in the country. You and I had this debate, last year. There is no official data, Amarachi, suggesting farm murders are, racially or ethically, or should I say, targeted as a, coordinated campaign. But what we are seeing here, Amarat, is that government policies such as the land reform, the affirmative action, the black economic empowerment, aims to address the historically injustices from apartheid. And, some Afrikaners argue that these policies are unfairly, displayed. They put them in a disadvantaged position. They disadvantage them. White others see them as, meanwhile other white farmers and white people see this as a necessary move to, for redress and also for transformation. But the bottom line, Amarachi, here is that the issues around international claim or genocide or persecution, really the claim that Afrikaners are facing genocide or systemic persecution have been widely disputed by human rights experts in the country, scholars and South African government and the organization like UN and also Amnesty International do not support what these people are claiming, that there's a genocide and persecution campaign underway in the country. But in conclusion, Amarachi, before I bring it back to you, while some Afrikaners feel marginalized or insecure, due to crime or economic policies in this situation does not mean the international definition of persecution or genocide. This term apply systemic, it's targeted impression, which in this case it's not supported by current evidence. And I hope I'm wrong, Amarachi, but it's a really difficult time for many South Africans. We find ourselves in this difficult time, but also there's a need for the leaders to really explain what is really happening in the country. Amarachi?
Yeah, unfortunately, the U.S. president has believed, some of these reports by the Afrikaner community that they're being persecuted. Unfortunately, the issue is being politicized. So 49 of them have upped and left South Africa. They're being given special status in the U.S. Their refugee status will be fast-tracked. And they're going to a country where the president has been trying to get rid of illegal immigration. So here's the kicker. President Trump is trying to get people out of the United States who are not American citizens, but he's welcoming Africans, white Africans. Help us understand if you can.
Yeah, Amarachi, we're living in very confusing times. And I was thinking about that earlier. I can't speak for the American government, but previously those South Africans, including some Afrikaners who have left the South Africa to the United States, they often do this because of seeking asylum, employment visas, or also investment immigration programs. But they are not guaranteed housing or job upon arrival unless they meet specific immigration criteria. In this case, which we're seeing the powerful men in the globe, and granting them that opportunity. But also in summary, Amarachi, what we're seeing here is that most of South African moving to the US, especially those citing fear of economic hardships, are not assured that they will get housing or jobs. They often rely on personal resources, private networks, or US-based families or communities. But we do know that the US migration policy does not automatically support claims of persecution without rigorous evidence. And in this case, I guess there was no proper analysis of what is happening on the ground in South Africa with regards to this, allegedly genocide in the country. So I guess there was lack of evidence. The people who were advising President Trump, they do not really understand the issues on the ground. I guess I wish they would have came to South Africa and basically understand what is happening on the ground. But yeah, confusing times, colleague.
Yeah, really confusing times. And I've also heard some saying that this is because Elon Musk is part of the Trump administration. Elon Musk, we know, is originally South African before, he claimed U.S. citizenship. But President Cyril Ramaphosa has responded to the issue of relocation, I think, at a forum sometime this week, probably yesterday. What did he say, though, about these Afrikaners who are moving to the U.S.?
Well, he still reiterated what the government's position is, and he tried to explain the so-called genocide. He explained the issue of the expropriation, that the government is not taking anyone's land. He really tried to explain, but we do know, Amarachi, that the president, South African president, will be meeting with President Donald Trump later, I think next week, they said, if my memory serves me well. But many South Africans have been saying that President Ramaphosa, should not go to the United States. They feel that he's going to get what they call in social media Zelensky. They feel that the president is going to be ambushed in the White House. So they feel that there's no need for him to go. But I guess it's important that he goes and explain his side of the story. But it's going to be difficult for President Ramaphosa, because what President Trump does is that he does this, this briefings where there's media, where some of the issues might not be ventilated properly because there's media and there's questions. So it does put him in a very precarious position. But I guess it's important for him to go so that he can, iron out some of these things, because we do need America as South Africa, because America is the second biggest trading country, after China. So it's important that we work and iron out all of these things bilaterally with America, so that we can find a consensus. For an example, Amarachi, issues around job creation. It's important that we iron out all of these issues, Amarachi.
Yeah, and it also is important for both leaders to prove that they are not racist. Innocent, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you so much, colleague.
Let's switch to other matters now. Freed Israeli-American hostage Eden Alexander reunited with his jubilant family at Reem military base on Monday evening after being released by Hamas. Israeli soldiers escorted Alexander to his waiting family, with his mother screaming and embracing him. Earlier, Hamas had transferred the Israeli soldier to representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross, who transported him through the Kisufim crossing in southern Gaza back to Israeli territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu credited the soldiers' release to Israel's military pressure and the diplomatic pressure applied by President Trump. In an official statement, the group expressed, that's the humanitarian group that is, expressed readiness to immediately begin negotiations aimed at reaching a comprehensive agreement for a sustainable ceasefire. According to the Israeli military, they're also asking for Israeli military withdrawal, lifting the blockade. This all concerns the situation in Gaza, which we understand is worsening by the day as Israel continues to prevent humanitarian aid from getting into the enclave. Well, back in the U.S., hundreds of residents from Tenafly in New Jersey were gathered at the Hurler Park on Monday to celebrate the release of Eden Alexander, a lifelong borough resident and the last American hostage to be freed from Hamas captivity. The crowd watched the broadcasts of the release on a great screen, displaying banners calling for his freedom and Israeli flags. The attendees were seen bursting with joy as Alexander was announced to be with the Red Cross team. They danced, they celebrated in paramount delight. The U.S. President Donald Trump has also welcomed the homecoming of Alexander, calling it big news. He said they thought he was dead for a short while ago. His parents are so happy.
Now begins with the Red Cross. The Red Cross has announced that he is with their team.
Moving to neighboring Mexico, what began as a festive campaign march quickly turned into a scene of terror in the state of Veracruz on Sunday night when a mayoral candidate was gunned down alongside 3 other people. A Facebook live stream captured the horror of that day, showing Yesenia Lara Gutierrez greeting residents as she paraded through the streets of Texitepec, surrounded by a caravan of supporters. The crowd was seen smiling and chanting before gunfire suddenly rang out off camera, drowning out their cheers. About 20 gunshots were heard in the video, which was still available on Lara's Facebook page the following day. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed the attack during her morning press conference on Monday and said she had no information yet about the motive. She added that her government is in coordination with Veracruz state officials and offered federal support if necessary. Authorities in Ecuador have begun demanding a yellow fever vaccination certificate from travelers arriving from Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, Brazil, due to the epidemiological risk posed by these countries where yellow fever is endemic or has recently seen outbreaks. The first international flights landing in the coastal city of Guayaquil at Jose Joaquin do Olmedo International Airport were met by airport and Ministry of Public Health personnel to check vaccination certificates, which must be presented either digitally or physically. The certificate must include the official health seal of the country of origin. The Minister of Health explained the measures applied to all passengers arriving in Ecuador from these countries. Some travelers were surprised at the policy. Others voiced their dissatisfaction with the controls. Australia's Liberal Party has for the first time chosen a woman as its leader, with Susan Lee to take over from Peter Dutton after he led the party to a bruising election loss. Lee, from the moderate faction of the party, beat Angus Taylor, who ran on a promise to restore conservative values, by 4 votes. At the election on May 3rd, the Liberal National Coalition, currently Australia's main opposition party, suffered what many are calling the worst defeat in its history. Pundits and MPs have blamed the result on polarizing leaders, a messy campaign, and Trumpian policies, which alienated women and young people in particular. Lee's appointment comes as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was sworn in at Government House on Tuesday, following his Labour Party's landslide election win. In the UK, police have arrested a man over suspicions he was involved in an arson attack on 2 properties and a car linked to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The 21-year-old was arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life and remains in custody, according to the police. Emergency services responded to a fire at the Prime Minister's private home in Kentish Town, North London, early Monday. On Sunday, crews were called to a small fire at the front door of a house converted into flats in nearby Islington, a property Sir Keir is understood to have lived in during the 1990s. Police are also looking at a small car fire which took place on Thursday on the same street as the Kentish Town property. It is understood the car used to belong to Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister is understood to still own the home in Kentish Town but lives in Downing Street. He lived there before the 2024 general election and has been rented out since then. We're off on a short break now on The World Today. Still ahead. It's all about the money for one big company in Chile. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. French President Emmanuel Macron has been scheduled to travel to the UK for a state visit in the month of July. According to Buckingham Palace, King Charles and Queen Camilla will host the president and his wife Brigitte at Windsor Castle on a visit from July 8th to July 10th. The King and Queen had paid a state visit to France in September of 2023, which was seen as a diplomatic success in helping to rebuild relations after Brexit. Such visits are a soft power opportunity to strengthen trade, cultural and defense ties, in this case with an important European partner. The chairman, CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Dr. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, has commended 12-year-old Amazing Grace Salami, a winner of the inaugural Spelling Bee in Nigeria, as she's set to represent the country at the 100th edition of the Scripps National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C. Mrs. Dabiri-Erewa describes Salami's achievement as a source of national pride, especially because her feat marks the nation's debut in the prestigious competition. Emphasizing the significance of Nigeria's participation in the global event, Mrs. Dabiri-Erewa noted that Nigeria and Ghana are the only African countries to ever participate since its establishment about a century ago. The NIDCOM boss reaffirmed the Commission's commitment to supporting initiatives that empower Nigerian youths and enhance the country's global presence through excellence and innovation. And during a courtesy visit to the NIDCOM headquarters, Salami shared her excitement about the upcoming competition and the opportunity to interact with peers from around the world. She's also grateful for the support received and pledges to represent Nigeria with excellence on the international stage. Reverend Mark Francis, a former classmate of Pope Leo XIV, recalled how surprised he was when Robert Prevost was elected as the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. He claimed the Peruvians could also rightfully claim him as their own, but he reflected on their friendship dating back to the Catholic Theological Union from 1977 to 1982, during an interview in Chicago on Monday. He believes the 69-year-old pontiff will serve as a nice contrast to U.S. President Donald Trump and expects him to call out Washington whenever human rights are neglected.
I remember him being very insightful, very direct, but he's not a person who wants to attract a lot of attention to himself. He's really kind of humble, and he's not really the first one to want to speak and kind of dominate the conversation. But apart from all that, what he has to say is usually really wonderful. And he kind of spoke, this is 40 years ago, he spoke about ministry and especially his ministry with poor people as a way of encountering God. And I thought that was very significant. And it continued to be, you know, for the rest of his career when he went to Peru to work with the people in Peru, again, the poor. There's a real dedication and focus on working with folks that are kind of on the margins. And so that's always been something that has attracted him. And that's how I've always been very respectful of that. He has a good sense of humor, but it's very subtle, and it's he's someone who is self-deprecating in terms of his humor. So he'd have a tendency to kind of make fun of himself before he'd make fun of anybody else. And I remember talking with him about certain ministerial things, and you know, we'd use a wrong word, or you'd make it the approach wasn't correct in terms of dealing with someone, and so we'd reflect on that, and then we'd laugh about it because we're all very human, and we don't always do the exact right thing at the exact time. I got to know him in a certain sense a bit better when we worked in Rome together. He was the prior general of the Augustinians, and I was the superior general of the Viatorians. And so several times a year we would get together and we would see one another and talk. And sometimes we'd even meet on planes going back and forth from Chicago and have conversations. And because our jobs were similar, I enjoyed those conversations because I learned a lot from him. And in terms of how to deal with certain issues, personnel questions, administrative questions, but also just why we're doing all this. The whole question of what is the church for? What are our ministries for in terms of reaching out and helping to bring God's love to the world.
Veamos si se dejan abrir, no siempre. A pesar de que estamos muy cerca, hay variantes de floraciones según el lugar. Esto hay que lavarlo muy bien. Tiene el cándida ahí.
Well, as you saw previously, a beehive of activities literally going on in Chile, where the queen bee market is buzzing. Our company, Renas Toledo, is marking a milestone by sending 181 queen bees to Costa Rica. How were they able to count those bees? And thereby opening the door to the Central American markets. The company, located in San Antonio in the Valparaiso region of Chile, has over 23 years of experience in the production and marketing of queen bees, both in the domestic and international markets. Vincent Toledo and Mariela Lemaison are owners of the company. They've been working on bee genetics for 12 years, raising more than 10,000 productive bees under healthy conditions in a variety that they like to call the San Antonio line. Exports of live beekeeping material increased by 52% in 2024, with Canada as the main market. Experts explain that Chilean queen bees are very docile, and while many countries struggle with Africanized bees, which are highly defensive and aggressive, the Chilean bees do not behave that way. The company is actively involved in the Regional Beekeeping Board and is recognized for its commitment to the development of the sector, particularly for its willingness to share knowledge and experiences with other industry players.
Es un invento nuestro, pero ahora casi todas las reinas que salen de Chile la usan. Va con agua, porque en el aeropuerto loco. Sí, la ubicaste. Y como son jóvenes, no son agresivas.
I don't know how many times I became anxious looking at those bees crawling all over the place. Well, time to buzz out of the studio. Thanks for watching. I'm Rakshan Ivani.